Hi, my name is Scott Swain with Director of Justice for Vets, division under 08DeeperUnderstandingofVeterans. I work with Carrollton Carson out of Alexandria, Virginia. I am a veteran, served in the United States Air Force for 15 years, 11 active, 4 reserve, served in the First Gulf War, Somalia, a few other fun and interesting places, Panama, and 32 different countries, more deployments than I can count, into all 50 states, so it gives you a different perspective, you know, so when you see vets, you know, it's great to do a little what we call military psychosocial, to find out where they've been, what they've done. I mean, it's not all about the trauma. A lot of times, you know, it's about, you know, learning. For me, you know, as a veteran, and working in veterans treatment courts. I worked in veterans treatment courts in the Seattle area before I came to Alexandria, Virginia. I'm a licensed mental health provider. I've been doing mental health treatment for about 20 years. I've learned a lot of things through that, but one of the things I learned from working in a community behavioral health center, I did contract work in Iraq and Afghanistan in air operations in 2005. So basically it was bringing in cargo for the military. So it was a really interesting experience as that goes. But when I came home, I started working for a community mental health center out in Seattle, south of Seattle. And I went to them, you know, and I just got hired. And I was the director of one of their sites. And, you know, when you're at their first meeting, you know, you're the new guy, the FNG, somebody can translate that for somebody. Right? I was the FNG at the table, and I felt like I had to say something, right? So the CEO comes to me and says, Scott, what do you have? I'm like, well, I'm curious about what the agency is doing for veterans. And they all looked at me like I had a third eye. And I'm like, is there something wrong? One, I was wearing a suit. That was what was wrong. First thing, it was Seattle. Nobody wears a suit. They wear Birkenstocks and socks as a work attire. So anyway, and somebody said, no, Scott, it's the VA's job to take care of the vet. So, you know, I don't want to be the angry vet right away because that confuses people. So I just said, no, I don't believe that. I think it's the community's job to bring our veterans home, no matter where they are, no matter what they need. So next thing you know how it works, right? I got a new job. So, Scott, we're going to create a veteran services program at Community Mental Health Center. So we were the first treatment facility in the state of Washington to create a specific veteran services program. So through this time, it was also kind of interesting. Seattle never met a tax they didn't like. Their sales tax is 9.89 or something like that. So buy it out of the county if you go visit that area. But what we found was they did a Veteran and Human Services levy. $6.5 million they raised for veterans for 6 years. It was renewed after 6 years by 72% of the vote. It's now up for its second renewal. So people really care. This is, to me, this is the only county in the country, and it's a very wealthy county, King County around Seattle, that has a specific levy just to help vets. So anyway, we started a lot of programs. So the first program I started was at the agency. And I said, you know, they said, well, we don't understand vets. And I said, what do you mean you don't understand vets? You know, of course, me being recently back from I was in Afghanistan right before I came back. I was back about a month. I was kind of in that same zone, like, yeah, I don't understand you either. So we started talking. I started talking to my fellow clinicians. I was a clinical supervisor, so I said, you know, what do you know about vets? He's like, well, what do you mean? You know, I have a hard time even treating them. Well, about that point, I'm like, well, what do you mean you have a hard time treating them? Well, you know, I don't like this whole warmonger thing. I'm more of a peacenik. And I'm like, oh, we've got some clinical work to do. Why? Why is it okay for them to think it's not okay, you know, to treat vets? And that just gave me a whole new understanding that they don't understand who we are at all. They have no clue. You know, we enlist and then the government decides where we go and what we do and all those kind of things. So I started training on military and veteran culture. This is back in 2007. And our first training I did was for our clinicians. At our agency, we had about 200 staff. About 140 of them were clinicians. So we started talking about it, and basically it started out from me looking at my career, my military understanding, what stayed with me, why I still check my gig line in the mirror, and I've been out for a long time, you know, and I see some military folks know what a gig line is. We'll get there. But I found out they didn't really understand anything about who we were, what our training was, any of that kind of stuff. Didn't understand there's subcultures in the military, there's different branches of service, and let me tell you, the Air Force is very different than the Army, which is very different than the Marine Corps, which is very different than the Coast Guard. All those service in the Navy, we're all very different based on our experiences. So, I will warn you, my wife always gets on my case because, she knows we have little boys. We have a 5-year-old who's going to be 6 in a couple weeks, and then a 4-year-old. So, language. Language, we say the F-bomb in the military like most people say good morning. It's not profanity in the way a lot of people do it. It's the way we talk to each other. My job in the military was to get cargo loaded on an airplane so I can get out of there, move the cargo to the next place it's supposed to go. So if I'm in the middle of a country, let's say Somalia, or some other place where we're trying to get in and get out, I'm not exactly nice about how I motivate you. If you're not doing things that what we need to do, there's a certain way. And the military is very used to getting screamed at. Boot camp. First thing they do is what do they do to you? They scream at you. I mean, about this far from your nose. So you get used to those kind of things. So I will try every way I can, but if you see an acronym that we're going to talk about, it might have the F-bomb in it. When you work with military and as a clinician, I found out, at least in my experience, the more they cursed, the better relationship I had with them. Because they felt like it was okay. Those fences came down and they just talked to me the way they spoke. And some people, that's offensive to them. Now, we know as vets, as we get out of the military, we can't talk that way. We're not going to talk that way in your court. We're not going to say those kind of things. But we have had it slip up. I remember one judge said, "What's blah, blah, blah mean?" And he told them. He told them exactly what the acronym meant. And it had 2 F-bombs in it. And the judge says, "Oh, okay, well, next time warn me a little bit, okay?" And everybody, of course, being adults, everybody in the court giggled, thought it was really funny. But the reality is, we know that there's things that we have to adjust to, but please understand, it's not a lot of times us cursing at people, it's just the language that we utilize. And the F-bomb in my parents' era is very different than what it is today. It's much more common, not saying it's correct. I certainly didn't learn how to talk that way in church, but those are the things that do come out. So, when I first started doing this, we started looking about, we talked about trauma-informed care over lunch, right? And the fact that we want to be trauma responsive. Well, it's the same thing for our veterans. We don't want you to just know about the culture. We want to know what you need to do with it. So really with veterans, if you want to be informed and really treat them the way they need to be treated when they go through this process, whether it's a court or whether it's treatment, we need to understand our culture, our trauma, and the resources. Those are the things that separate us from the drug courts. And what else separates us from the drug courts? Our veterans have a foundation. A lot of times our drug court participants do not have a foundation that veterans have because they've been through boot camp. How many people have been through military boot camp? Raise your hand. Okay. So, how many people still remember their drill instructor's name? You will not forget that. And I can't tell you, some of you might have been a few years, right? But you still remember those things. So some of those things are imprinted on you in a way that's hard to understand. But one thing I have, that you can talk about culture, which breaks it out, training experiences. And there's 21.6 million veterans in this country. There's 21.6 million stories. Each one of us has a different story. My service was not his. His was not mine. His was not mine. We all did different things. So you can't take for granted that, say, during the primary Iraq time, of course, that boots on the ground, we have about 5,000 troops with boots on the ground in Iraq, so we're still there. But guess what? All those people that served all these places, they all did different things. If you were in the Navy, do you think the Navy was running convoys from Kuwait up into Iraq? Yeah, they were. But you wouldn't think of that, right? You would just think the Navy's on a ship somewhere. Think of the Air Force. Everybody in the Air Force flies, right? No, they don't. It's a support. There's lots of things that are very different from each branch. So when I say there's 21.6 million veterans, you need to know that you need to hear that story from that one veteran so you know what they experienced. And again, I'm not getting to the trauma. I'm just talking about the fact where you went to boot camp. Why did you join? That's where the question starts. Why did you join? So, I joined the Air Force. Why did I join the Air Force? Well, The Marine Corps guy was a little scary. Didn't want to go that route. No, really, my uncle, he wasn't my uncle, a friend of my father's, worked with him. I went to his house when I was a little kid. Saw his picture. He was a security policeman. In the Air Force, the only people that wore berets in the Air Force were the security policemen. And there's this really cool picture he had in his house of him with his M16, his beret, his blue uniform. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. And it was, in my time, it was right after Carter, it was right in Reagan, you know, when they were starting to really put more pride back in military service and past the Vietnam era. And I wanted to serve. So that's why I joined. But everybody has a different reason. So getting to those kind of reasons is where the story starts. It doesn't always start with the fact of, I went in the military, I served in Iraq, I served in Afghanistan, I served in Panama, I served in Bosnia, I served all these other places. It goes back to the beginning of why did you go in? And what were your experience like? I mean, those are motivational interviewing questions, right? It's not, what was your MOS? Well, an MOS is what? Who can tell me what an MOS is?
Military occupational specialist.
Okay, who said that? I'm sorry. Hearing voices. Okay, so, and what branch is that for?
Well, MOS that I'm familiar with is Army. I think it pertains to all branches of service, although the different branches may have a different term for it.
Right, so it doesn't apply to all branches of service. It's the Army and it's the Marine Corps. Those are the only two that have MOS. Air Force has Air Force Specialty Code. Navy's changing theirs, but it's a rate. What's your rate, you know, and rank, and there's different things. So again, to be culturally competent, you want to know the difference. So you wouldn't ask somebody what your MOS is. You say, what do you do in the military? We can speak English, we can speak the same language, but know what you're going to get when you do it. So these are the worst questions you can ask. But let me tell you, I know a veteran that has had all those questions asked. The first one, did you kill anybody? Now we think, what? That's the most stupid question you can ask somebody, right? But it's always in the back of somebody's mind. Either our mind or yours. Law enforcement. You know, anybody in law enforcement here? No? But what do they ask? Can I touch your gun? You shoot anybody? I mean, that's what they ask all the time. So veterans, they want to know, did you kill anybody? Now, as a veteran, how am I even going to want to have some kind of relationship talking to you when I think in the back of your mind you wondered if I killed somebody? So, what about the guy that served in the United States Army? His job was a sniper. He goes home from his second tour in Iraq, and his mother and father try to talk to him about what he did. Well, they know he was a sniper. What do you think he did? What do you think he did?
Shot people.
Shot them? Let's go a little farther. Killed them. So again, if we can't even say it, how are we going to get to any of that kind of trauma? Now, you're not going to discuss that with them, but we know that's one of those things. It's always the elephant in the room of people are going to ask you dumb questions. Have you ever been to the front? When's the last war we had a front? Tell me, anybody? Korea. Korea. And how many people know anything about Korea? Well, you know, I mean, so this is the kind of thing, was it hot in Iraq? Anybody been to Iraq? I have. Was it hot?
It's the most rhetorical question.
Yeah, right. So, but what do we as humans revert to? What do we revert to? The basic questions. What am I going to say about Montana? It's beautiful. I mean, I just love leaving the airport and coming down trail something, that road, you know, from the airport down to Billings. I mean, it's gorgeous here. I've been here before. I used to live in Forsyth. So there's lots of things that I know about Montana and Miles City and a few other fun places I've been. But when you think about it, what are you going to say when you don't know what to say? You revert to the weather, the price of gas, all these other stupid questions because you really don't know what to say. You're going to make mistakes when you're working with veterans. You're going to ask stupid questions. Please, God, don't ask to kill one. But, you know, those are the kind of things you're going to have to figure out what to say. What did you do in the military? What branch? So when you get to, these are the things that you think you don't know how to interact with veterans, but you do. You have tools. You talk to people all the time. You have tools to make relationships. We're not any different than that. Now, we sometimes will put up a wall in front of you and say, because you didn't serve, you can't talk to me. This is the last thing you should get from this presentation. It doesn't matter whether you're a veteran or not. You can help these people get better. You can help them get back on track. You can do wonderful things for them. Because what are you modeling? You're modeling someone who really never served, never wore a uniform, and now you're trying to build that bridge to us. Sometimes we won't build it to you. Maybe we'll meet you in the middle, but that's where it comes from. It all comes from you. So, how many people here have served in the military again? Raise your hand. Okay. Branch. What branch did you serve?
Army.
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 Ooh. Okay, that's all I can say. I was the Air Force guy. We didn't have a saying. It was more like, what's a per diem? I had a different relationship. But, so, top 4 questions. You want to start a relationship, you have to start it with, there's a book out for, I think it was for therapists, but it was for other folks, called What Do You Say After You Say Hello? And this is what you got to get to. What branch were you in? Now, we know about the Army and the Air Force. Tell me, what are the other branches that aren't veterans? Tell me what the other ones are.
Navy.
Marine Corps?
Navy.
Navy?
Coast Guard.
Coast Guard. See, don't forget the Coast Guard. They're not under DOD, they're under Homeland Security, but they do count. And it used to be the Air Force was the only one that could make fun of the Coast Guard because everybody else made fun of us. So, but, branch, what do you do in the military and how can I connect you to services? Every veteran that I know, and the way we used to work with our treatment center, the way we would bring the veterans in, we'd say, come in and we'll review your benefits. We were a mental health center, so it was a little hard to get people to come to us. But we started a program called Veteran Navigators. So our whole job is you would come in and we would go over all your benefits. What are you using? What aren't you using? You know, I've never used my VA home loan, but I'm eligible for it. It's a great benefit. Guaranteed home loan. How can you beat that? No closing costs. There's all kinds of really cool things that they're eligible for. So those are the kind of things that we started with. So these are basic questions where you can get the story. Where are you going to get some of the factual information about a veteran? Factual. Federal government's going to give you a document. What's that document called?
DD Form 214.
DD Form 214. In God we trust, everyone else we get your 214. Because it's really cool, at least, it's really interesting. Veterans used to get the abused when they came home from Vietnam, right? Now veterans are honored. Military folks are honored much more than they ever were, which is wonderful that we've had this change in our country, but now we have people that use it and pretend like they're veterans. And you know, we had one guy that came into our program and he showed me his 214. It said he had a Silver Star, a Purple Heart, and served in Iraq, like 3 tours in Iraq. I mean, all the stuff looked legit to me. I mean, I'm on 214, and I see vets every day, all day, and it was forged. But he was smart enough. This is one of the things with criminal behavior. You're thinking, man, if he could have used this stuff for good, he could be doing some incredible stuff. But he lied to us. And the federal government actually, you know, did prosecute him for using VA services fraudulently. And you know, but again, DD 214 will tell you your discharge status, your re-enlistment, what your training's. Now, if I see an Army 214, well, your training's going to be different than mine. So I'm going to ask questions. Say, what was this training like? Where was that? Oh, it was at Fort Benning. Oh yeah, what was that like? Oh, it's so, you know, you're going to hear it, and guess what are they going to do? They're going to tell you a story. Veterans are good storytellers if they trust you. And it's not even getting to the trauma, it's just they're storytellers. Why? Because we've had these unique experiences that hopefully none of you will have. There's some really good ones that are funny and, you know, MREs and, you know, I was laughing when you guys were talking about starch and, you know, stitching them up. The glue one I'd never heard of. That's pretty funny. But now, you know, we make fun of the newer military because they don't have to polish their shoes because they're, you know, all like canvas or something else. So, you know, spit shine stuff was back in the old days. But, again, that's an example of generational. Your Vietnam veteran is very different generationally than someone that maybe served in the first Gulf War, that served in Iraq or Afghanistan or Panama or Bosnia or one of these other, you know, peacekeeping operations that we did. So, when I first started doing this training, it was really interesting because a lot of people said, well, there's no culture. Sure there is, you know. We have different laws, the Uniform Code of Military Justice. You know, I can get prosecuted with an Article 15 if I get a sunburn and I can't do my job. Now, to most people that's ludicrous, right? But for us, if it takes 7 people to fly an airplane and I'm sunburned so bad I can't fly, that airplane doesn't fly, that mission doesn't fly, the people who need what we had in that airplane will not get there. So I mean, there's serious consequences for us not showing up. And guess what? We don't have a way that we can take a sick day. I mean, it doesn't really work that way. Now, you can go, but it just doesn't work that way. And our jobs are very different. So understanding we are an operational asset to the Department of Defense. That's what we are. Now, yes, they look at us as humans in lots of other ways, but that's what reality, what we are and what we do. So understanding that culture is very different. You know, the culture that we have is different for each one of us a little bit. You know, boot camp is different for the Army and the Air Force and the Marine Corps and the Coast Guard and the Navy, but there's some similarities. But when you move from that next step to your training, it's very different, whether you go to advanced, what's AIT?
Advanced
Individual
There you
training.
go. So, that's Army. So, but for me, it was technical school. So I went to the next technical school. So I learned to learn how to be a loadmaster. So most of my job was weight and balance. So I had to do coefficients of friction and projections and all these things to put things in an airplane, tie it down, get it moving to the next place. So that was my job. So a lot of it was math. So I learned the basics at Shepherd Air Force Base in Texas. Then I went to Altus, Oklahoma, and learned the specifics of the C-5 aircraft out of Dover Air Force Base, which is the airplane I flew on. And then I went on to my base. And I was still stupid, as my instructors would call us. Why? Because you were taught it, but you don't know how to do it. So then your training continues. And in the military, training continues forever. There is no lack of training, right? You're just retrained on what you already know. Unless something changes, then we train you, and then we retrain you on it. So they're used to these kind of things when you get them in their court, that they're used to being trained. They're used to learning new things. They're used to being held accountable. So all those things are kind of normal to us. It isn't out of the norm for us to have this stuff there. So there's two kinds of culture really, explicit and implicit. Explicit is easy. That's knowing the different branches of service, what the uniforms look like. Of course, the uniforms, the camouflage uniforms change like every week, it seems, right? So those are kind of new. But, you know, Marine Corps, if you look at a bunch of uniforms, I bet you, and you never even served in the military, well, you could probably pick out a Marine uniform, right? Okay, they're sharp, you know, they had a lot of commercials out there, we know that. An army of one, you know, I never understood that, but somebody told me one was officer, NCO, and enlisted, but I don't know if that was ever true, but anyway, it's all marketing. But, laws and services. The implicit stuff is how it happened to you. How long were you in the military?
13 years.
13 years. Now, 13 years versus 4 years is very different, right? The enculturation that came to you or to somebody, how long were you in?
35 years.
So, his enculturation is intense, right? So, those are the kind of things that is different when you get these veterans in your Veterans Treatment Court. If you don't ask the right questions, you're not going to understand what that enculturation was like. In other words, it might be deeper for somebody. If they were a non-commissioned officer or an officer, they've had leadership positions, they've been in, so there's some kind of things that you would expect of them that maybe you might not expect of somebody that served 2 years and got kicked out. Or somebody that came to your program never even made it through boot camp. But why didn't they make it through boot camp? They blew out their knee on the obstacle course or the confidence course. Was that their fault? No. So I mean, there's lots of things that we in the military look at each other differently. These subcultures of combat vets versus non-combat vets. All these kind of things are ingrained in us that you kind of got to understand, because that therapeutic milieu of veterans in the back of your court, there's stuff going on all the time, and you just kind of need to be aware of how that's affecting you. There's no unified culture, of course. We know there's different, you know, there's people that were deployed, people that weren't deployed. Well, your war was better than my war was better than your war, and there's all those kind of things that they weren't better, they weren't different. They were different in how they experienced them. Vietnam, you did one tour, it was a year. You know, my buddy did 10 tours. He did 5 in Afghanistan and 5 in Iraq. His life is different. His family's life was different every deployment. He's one of my best friends, and he's struggling, I know. He's struggling hard, because now, you know, he still wants to stay in the military, but he can't do one more deployment. He says, I can't do it. So, I mean, this is the kind of thing that people struggle with. And it depends on, what that was for you. Now, those are the branches. Now, if you don't have those in your court, I would recommend having either the flags or the roundels or something in your court. I always look for mine. It's just a cultural competence piece. It's nice to have. We put our little flags up by, up by the court, and it gives us a sense of that you kind of get the culture, even if you don't. You're attempting to. These are some of the more humorous ones that we have. As far as what chair force I never really liked. It was a little lame, especially when I was in the Flying Air Force. It was a little hard to take. But Coast Guard, they have a sense of humor. Both those came from Coast Guard guys. We're Navy light. We're not really the Navy. We do lots of different things. Who we are. Now, one of my best friends that I was talking about, he was a Marine. And he's my best friend. I don't call him Jarhead. Now, his other buddies in Marines call each other Jarheads. So it's, again, you don't have to be the cool kid. It's just knowing. We had a judge, and he said, Scott, they're getting really loud back there on a break in the court. And I said, oh, no, it was just an Army or Marine guy having a discussion. It sounded like they were fighting. Oh, no, they weren't fighting. They were just talking. It's just the way they talk, and they were talking about, they were both in Iraq at the same time, and they were just having a discussion. But it's kind of comical about how that comes. It's a camaraderie that you have. You just got to make sure that camaraderie doesn't go off on somebody else. And what I mean by that is, anybody know what a fobbit is? Right, what's a fobbit?
Somebody who doesn't leave the wire?
Yeah. Is that a compliment?
No.
No. It's basically calling somebody a coward, right? Because they don't go outside the wire because it's dangerous out there. And it's not that it's not their job, but there was somebody that was in one of the courts. She was a nurse, and this one guy who was anyway, he was interesting. Anyway, he called her a fobbit. She was not a fobbit. Her job was at the hospital. Her job wasn't to go outside the wire, and he called her a fobbit. What did that do to her? What do you think that did to her? Huh?
Invalidate her?
Yeah, totally. I'm not a veteran. Well, hey, about 15% of the overall military are women. 20% of the Air Force, 20% of the National Guard, 20% of the reserves are women. The highest increase we have in military service of categories is women. So the fact that, you can't take for granted that it's a veteran and they're not a woman. So again, being culturally aware of who serves, when, everywhere. When I was in Afghanistan, we were running from one airport to another in a van one night, and our driver was a female. She was wearing civilian clothes, but she was female and she was Army. So what's the difference with her being outside the wire versus a man? There wasn't at that moment. We were praying she knew what she's doing to get us where we needed to go. But those are the kind of things you just need to be aware of. We call each other what we call each other, but that's up to us, not up to you. So again, but if it comes derogatory, you need to know enough to tamp it down if it does. And most of the vets will police themselves, but every once in a while you get somebody that's a little too full of themselves. And in my estimation, at least in my experience, the people that talk most about what they did the least, as far as combat experience and that kind of stuff. Most people just don't talk about it. I mean, if they talk about it in treatment, that's one thing, but as far as open court. Also, if you have somebody in your court and you see they're 214, it says they have a silver star, we had a judge who said, well, I want to honor him. I said, well, honoring him is not telling, or getting his permission if you wanted to say anything. I said, but I want to honor him. Let him decide if he wants to be honored, because it will separate him from some of his other vets. So just being aware of some of those cultural aspects that we have are really unique. You need to know a little bit about the history. We haven't had a war since when? We don't call them wars, we call them operations, right? So if we look at Allied Force, anybody know what that is?
Well, Grenada.
Yeah. Restore Hope.
Somalia.
Nope.
No, Restore Hope was after Desert Storm.
Yeah. So it was Desert Shield, Desert Storm, Restore Hope. That was some of the no-fly zones up in the Kurd areas and those things. Enduring Freedom. Afghanistan. Where else?
Yeah.
There's also DC also.
Yep.
Noble Eagle.
And Noble Eagle what was after 9/11, and there were a lot of assets that did stuff to protect the country after 9/11. That was called Noble Eagle. Enduring Freedom was Afghanistan, but it was also the Philippines. We had a lot of troops in the Philippines. It's Djibouti. Anybody heard of Djibouti?
Joy.
Right. So, you know, Djibouti's on the Horn of Africa, a little country over there. We have a lot of assets in there as well. So, I mean, knowing that, ask them where they serve. So if they say, oh, Operation Enduring Freedom, just ask them where. Iraqi Freedom, and then Iraqi Freedom became what?
New Dawn.
New Dawn. And then it became Inherent Resolve. And then Afghanistan is now Freedom Sentinel. So again, you're going to have newer vets that are coming in your court from those operations that might say that on their 214, or they tell you that. You just need to be aware of it. Again, you know, and age is good to have some kind of general idea of asking. Like, you know, I remember driving around Seattle one day and this guy had this sign that says, Vietnam vet, need food. And I'm like, dude, you're like 25. You know, this is impossible. So be aware that stuff is there. You take an oath. We never stop taking that oath. We took that oath once. When you leave the military, they don't rescind that oath. So there's a lot of times and a lot of vets out there that still believe they still owe that to each other and to themselves. So I remember when I took that oath, it was right before my 19th birthday. Nobody was joking. Everybody was serious. I mean, had this look on their face like, oh my God, I don't know what we're getting into. But that was something very powerful when we took that at the MEP Center before we went off to, you know, we all took it together, and then the Army guys went here, the Air Force guys went here, Navy guys went here, everybody split off, but you all took that oath together. When you start boot camp, you know, it starts most, I think they do it psychologically. I've never known of anybody that got there in the daylight. I got there in the middle of the night. You know, they picked us up at the airport in San Antonio, Texas, drove us in these buses, and, you know, I went in back in the day when you didn't have YouTube, where all this stuff is on YouTube, where you can see what it was like when, you know, the Marines get off their bus and, you know, you see the footprints in the concrete painted is where to stand. Oh no, we didn't have that. So we knew nothing of what to expect. And, you know, they're screaming and yelling at you, and, you know, it's so intense. You just can't describe what that feeling's like. You're an 18, 19-year-old man or woman, and you're standing there, and this person, you don't know what they can or can't do to you. They say, well, they can't hit you. Doesn't feel like that, right? You know, only a Marine Corps boot camp can get his eyes to bug out like that. Intense. If you can't read that at the back, it says, it was at that point when Timmy realized this wasn't the bus to summer camp. So if you ask a vet, well, you're in the military, right? You like camping, right? Well, you know, it might take vets a little bit while to get back into camping, because no, being in the military was not like camping. It was very different. You meet the Smokey the Bear hat. You know, I always thought that's why state troopers have a Smokey the Bear hat, just to intimidate the heck out of you. Because you ever see, you know, of course, if you have a law enforcement officer behind you and they pull you over, you're nervous already, right? Even if you haven't done anything wrong, you're nervous already. So I see a Smokey the Bear hat, and my trauma begins at that point. So they change you. If I was to take all of you and I say, okay, boys in that room, girls in that room, strip down to everything, and we're going to cut your hair. You're all going to look alike. We're going to strip you, hat to your undies, everything different. Don't you think just that psychologically will change your opinion of what's going on, and you start thinking about things? Because that's what happened. They take all your civilian clothes, they put it in a bag, and they lock it in a room. And the only time you see it is, when do you see your civilian clothes?
Graduation day.
Graduation or what?
Or do you kicked out?
Kicked out. You get that walk of shame. We were a drill instructor, and they made all of us watch that. And it was very powerful. That walk of shame, when someone was getting kicked out of boot camp, we'd all have to stand there. I was in the old World War II barracks, and the DI would go over, he'd unlock the door, he'd open it, he'd send the guy in there, and he'd bring out his civilian clothes. And he'd go in there and change, and he'd walk out. And that was the most powerful thing, because you don't want to fail. You want to blend. You don't want to be noticed, especially in boot camp. So again, you know, undies to your hat. I mean, it's very intense in what they do. This is our future officers. This is West Point. And Sometimes you're a little bit of a guinea pig. Anybody remember what these are?
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, get your shots. Line them up. Boom. Anybody had a GG shot? Gamma globulin? Yeah. Where do you get it? Right here. Right in your hip. And it has to go in cold, so you get this marble on your hip. So most people, when I say GG, they reach their hand around and go, oh yeah, I remember that one. But anthrax. Before the last Gulf War, what did they do? Gave us anthrax shots that were not approved by what?
FDA.
FDA. So I mean, there's lots of things that you're a little concerned about, but you don't have a choice and you move on. Now, what kind of glasses is that individual wearing?
BCGs.
Okay, tell me what BCGs are.
Birth control glasses.
Birth control glasses. So that means in boot camp there is going to be no extracurricular activities. Now, I was working on one of my presentations. I was at home visiting my parents in Nashville, and I had the laptop on the kitchen table, and my dad saw, I guess maybe I had under it because someone else was giving the presentation, BCGs. And Dad said, well, what's BCGs? I said, well, those are birth control glasses. He said, oh, really? So he goes to his office and he brings out his wedding picture. What do you think my father was wearing? And there's 5 of us kids. So he said, not so, son. I said, well, okay, Dad. And these glasses are actually coming back into form. So it's so funny, I think, that people won't take violent veterans and veterans treatment course. Why? Because what do they teach us to be? Violent. Do they unteach us to be violent? No. So this is the kind of thing. Why did BJA? BJA made that change in their grant process. That now you can get money if you take violent offenders, because we are taught to solve some of our problems by violence. So again, domestic violence. It's an issue, right? You know, it's always an issue with our courts. Domestic violence, what is it? Well, it's very different from somebody being a domestic violence perpetrator than someone that committed an act that is responsive. Again, there's difference between reasons and excuses. So always look into what the experience of and what they actually did, you know, before you take them into your court. So, firearms. Oh boy. Do veterans love firearms? Does Montana love firearms? Yeah. When I came into the airport, I've never seen so many firearms coming through the baggage carousel. I'm like, oh, this is great. I should have brought mine, but actually the judge said I should have, but I don't have mine. So, but these are the kind of things we're comfortable with. One of my clients came in one day for a therapy session, and he said, Scott, I had a great day. I said, really, what happened? Man, I killed a bunch of paper. I said, good for you. How'd that feel? He said, oh, it was great. Me and my buddies went out. What did they do when they kill paper? What's that mean?
Started shooting.
Yeah, you target practice. And you know, when this client first came in, he was very anti-therapy and therapists in general. It's like, where's your couch? You gonna shrink my head? It's like, no, I'm not gonna shrink your head. And no, actually, I don't have a couch. But we're gonna talk about stuff. Oh, are you gonna make me count? Are you gonna teach me to breathe? I said, no, the military taught you to breathe. I don't need to teach you that. He said, what do you mean they taught me to breathe? I said, well, I remember when I was learning how to fire a firearm. What did they teach me? My breathing is going to control the shot. My breathing is going to control the shot. Then he called me an expletive because I was able to relate therapy to the military. But we got along fine after that. But the reality is, be aware of what it is. Now, I know a lot of courts, you know, you can't have possession of a firearm, but what if they want to go hunting? We had one guy that was a Korean War vet, and he was with the VFW, and he said he would not come into Veterans Treatment Court. This guy had 6 DUIs over his lifetime. This was his last shot. And he was a Korean War vet. And he said, well, I do the firing parties at the National Cemetery. And so we made a special caveat in the order that he could possess a ceremonial firearm that fired blanks for the funerals at the National Cemetery. He said, okay. And he said, I'm really glad you understand how important that is to me. I mean, that's cultural stuff right there, that you got it enough to know that one, it wasn't a safety concern. He never had a charge related to a firearm. It was all alcohol. That was his crutch. That was everything he had. And for him to be sober enough to fire a firearm, we were really hopeful for it. But he got a scram bracelet. It worked out well in the end. But you're going to take a risk sometimes. You're taking a risk. They're coming into your court. Why? Because they're high risk. So again, you know, being knowledgeable about that. I think the Marines have moved up. Look at those BCGs. Those are nice, you know, so they've changed a little bit. So, what's he telling him?
Got some rust.
Probably got stuck rust in his butt plate.
All right. So, why is a clean firearm important?
Dirty ones don't function.
There you go. And they're going to save your life. Now, a lot of times, you know, even in boot camp, and you're young and you're impressionable and you're not thinking about it. I remember when we had to take apart the M16 and put it back together with a blindfold. You know, I was this smart aleck in boot camp. I used to get in so much trouble for things I would say and the drill instructor would hear. I was like, why do I have to do that? And, you know, all of a sudden he came up behind me, scared the living daylights out of me, whispered in my ear, you might have to fight in the dark, asshole. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to remember that one from now on. But think about all the things that we've been through that you can equate and help them learn from a foundational approach, that they've learned things that didn't make sense to them, but now they become second nature. They had a mission in the military. All you're doing now is giving them a new mission. So, you know, they talked about a lot today about SAMHSA and the 4 things, and the last one was purpose. For our folks, it's mission, because we know what mission is. So you tell them their mission is to get better. Your mission is this. You know, that's the kind of thing that's really helpful. So, what's this?
C-rats.
C-rats. Now, I can tell from the older folks, including myself, we had C-rats. What do you use to open C-rats?
P38.
P38. What's a P38?
It's one of
opener?
these.
Yeah, he's got one. Nice. Or you have another. The bigger ones are called a B52. He's got one on his keychain. Nice. So if you want to look, you can check him out in the back. He's got his B38 with him. But look at what was in there. Cigarettes. I mean, that's not what they have now. But this is generational. So about 1980, 86, 87 is when they moved into MRE, which are meals ready to eat. Now, a lot of times, you know, anybody have a favorite MRE that had to eat them?
Chicken a la king.
Chicken a la king.
Beef
Anybody
stew.
else? Beef stew. I like chicken and rice myself. Anybody know enough to know what their favorite C-rat was?
Green eggs and ham.
Oh God, you're sick. All right, that was the nastiest thing. You pull that can open, and it really was. It was green eggs and ham. It was nasty. Anyway, mine was more pound cake. You can tell, pound cake, fruit cup. But
Barbecue.
these are the kind of things that meals. What do we do at home over meals?
Talk.
Talk. What do you think they do in the field over meals?
Talk.
Talk. So there's ways that you can talk to people and talk to them about not being the cultural guru, but at least understanding, hey, some guy was talking about MREs. Did you have them? I used to always have some in my office. And they'd be laying there. I wouldn't say a thing about them. And literally every veteran would walk into my office, pick it up, and see that it was vegetarian, and they'd throw it in the trash. Why do you think it was sitting there? I wasn't going to eat it either. But those are the kind of, and then I had a halal one in there, and that started a whole nother conversation. Halal meal, anybody know what halal is?
No, it's for Islamic soldiers.
Right. So we would have halal meals that would be delivered to Islamic countries, and in the beginning, unfortunately, we were sending them MREs like pork slices and stuff, and that didn't go over very well. Same thing with the Jewish community. So again, cultural competence is really important, but some people, even you think they're smart, and they're dumb because they haven't really looked at what that cultural stuff is. The time it makes you dumb is when you don't ask the question and admit that you don't know everything. When I first started working with the Somali population, I'd been to Bara, Somalia, but I literally knew nothing about the country or the culture. So what did I do? I became a Google warrior. I looked up the Somali culture. I looked up the things so I could be more learned. When I'd go into the jail and I'd do evaluations of Somalis in jail, because of the difference between how they viewed mental health was very, very different. You think we have a stigma. There's lots of other countries that the stigma is 100 times what the stigma of mental health is, here. So, ranks and titles. So, very hierarchical, officers enlisted. You can get charged with, fraternizing with an officer if you're an enlisted person, and officers as well. You salute an officer. Anybody that's superior in rank to you. You're not going to see a lot of officers. How many people here actually are working in a veteran treatment court now? Does anybody have any officers in your program? No.
I don't think we've had an officer.
Yeah, probably not. I mean, when you get out of the military, DUI?
Or captain. He was the captain DUI.
Yeah. So again, how did I know that? And it's just the experience of some of those things. Now, officers come out of the military. They go in the military with a degree. So they have to have at least a bachelor's degree to become an officer. An enlisted person doesn't. Now, I came out of the military with a master's degree, which is very rare as an enlisted person. But that doesn't mean but when they do get out of the military, it does translate to them having a lot better options than an enlisted person. So someone gets out with an officer, they've got connections, they already have a degree, they've already had a big leadership position. It is very different. But most of the people you're going to see are the enlisted folks. There's a picture of a fobbit. So again, it's basically just calling somebody a coward the nice way. So this is some of the ones that I've gotten from different friends of mine, other people I've encountered. We have all of our own acronyms. Sometimes they're going to, give you those, and they'll tell you what they mean. Sometimes they don't. And anybody have any questions about any of them? I'm sure you know all of them, right? Use the people that you have. How many people here have family members that are in the military or were? You have a great source right there. Ask them. I always ask my friends, what would you want somebody to know about your military service? Now, even when they asked me that the first time, I had to think about it because I wasn't sure. But that's a great question to ask your family and your friends. What would you want them to know? And tell me an acronym that you feel like you can tell me. I mean, those are the that's how you get the information. The same thing, it's very helpful. They may drop the F-bomb, they may, say something. They're all not politically correct. Some of them are rather crude, but the military has this way that it's supposed to be. And then there's a reality of what the military is. So there is a little bit different, when we do these things. Some of these, like DFAC. What's a DFAC?
Down in Chow Hall.
Yeah. So I was in Iraq. I was at Balad Air Base in 2005. So I'm in civilian clothes. And when you're in civilian clothes in a combat zone, people already look at you weird, like, who are you working for? What are you doing? Why you're here? So I said to this Army specialist walked by. I said, hey, where's Chow Hall? He said, hey, old man, DFAC's over there. Like, so much for respect. But in the military and the Air Force, we call it a Chow Hall. Army might call it a dining facility, but they call it a DFAC. So again, they're all a little bit different. Speaker monkey, anybody know what that is?
RTO.
Psych ops person, So Army, all military services have psychological operations. The biggest one I remember is Panama because I was involved in that, where they had all these psych ops guys trying to get Noriega out of that church. You remember what they were doing to get him out?
Playing rock music.
Yeah, AC/DC, all this. So psychological ops. So there's lots of things that people do. My favorite one was Lima Lima Mike Foxtrot. Anybody know what that is? Or somebody not willing to say? Huh?
Say it again.
Lima Lima Mike Foxtrot. LLMF. I had a client call me and he didn't know where my office was. And he said, Lima Lima Mike Foxtrot, Scott. Lost like a mother. So I knew what it meant. So I said, well, where are you? This guy had been avoidant. He canceled 4 appointments before this one. So there's no way I was going to let him get away with thinking that I didn't know what that meant. But again, they're going to try a lot of reasons. PTSD, if you have PTSD, it's called the avoidance disorder for a reason. It's not just avoiding some of the things, it's avoiding getting treatment, it's avoiding to talking to people, it's avoiding anything that will remind you of it. So again, they're going to use a lot of things to get away with that. But, if you have any of these later you want to ask, yeah.
What's a salad suit?
Salad Suit was a female National Guardsman. She was on duty and she came in for a therapy appointment. And she sat down in the chair and said, hey, sorry for the salad suit. I'm like, salad suit? I didn't even know what it meant. She said, oh, that's camouflage uniform. That's what she called it.
Oh.
So I didn't even know. I'm like, salad suit? What? So anyway, of course that military uniform had changed already. So, warrior ethos. Warrior ethos means different people to different people, different ways depending upon what you did. So it's deep into, say, SEAL teams, Rangers, people that intense combat, warrior ethos is different. Well, you don't live, that's not a bumper sticker. That's what you live. How do you replace warrior ethos when you get out? Leave, what's it say? I will never leave a fallen comrade behind. That means dead, alive, pieces. We're still going back into Vietnam. We're still going back into Europe, trying to excavate bodies and bring them home. That is part of our honor and our culture of doing that. And, you know, I remember I just read on the news, I mean, they just interned, an Air Force guy where they recovered his remains from Iraq. I mean, the first Gulf War. Just happened. You know, last week they interned his remains in Arlington. So again, what do you do with that when you get out? What is honor? Does honor live in our society as civilians? Think about it. Do you live honor? I mean, when it's more than beat into you, it's not really that sense. It's part of who you are. So we have a lot of guys that maybe get into a bar fight. They may misconstrue a communication from, say, you and your significant other at a bar, and he pushes you. What he sees is he just hit a woman. And he kicks the living crap out of that person, now has an assault charge. Why? Exaggerated honor that he didn't know what to do with it, and he misinterpreted a situation. That happens time and time again all across the country every day. So again, warrior ethos is something that helps us in the military, but unless we figure out a way to translate that mission back to being a civilian by helping other veterans, going into law enforcement, back into service, all these things, we have to figure out what that is and what do we do with it. So, warrior ethos is great in the military, right? It gives you a sense of honor, identity, but when you leave the military, what do you do with it? I remember the first time I zipped up that flight suit, and I wore a flight suit for the first time. I was part of the Flying Air Force, not the ground pounders. I was on an airplane, you know, and that's one of the coolest moments of my career. Okay, I was a little arrogant, you know. We used to call ourselves zipper-suited sun gods. I mean, really, our egos were just, but you know what else I remember? Last time I unzipped and hung up. Who am I now? I was an Air Force loadmaster, non-commissioned officer, flew all over the world, had responsibility for this millions and millions of dollars of equipment and airplane and other people's lives. And now who am I? And as hard as the military tries, the military, they're not responsible anymore once you get out. So who is responsible? It's not the VA. VA take care of your health care, VA do some other stuff, but who's going to translate that into me being that honorable veteran? Because in my mind, I never will be a civilian. It was funny, when you get out of the military, you're so excited, you're short. How short are you? I'm a single-digit midget. Oh, I can play handball up against the curve. You know, you're really excited to get out because you're going to be a civilian. And yet, we keep our hair short. We will grow beards. But we still have that thing that's in us that you really can't take out of us. Some of us use it very well, and we do well in business, and we do really incredibly in all these other areas. And then a lot of our older veterans, what do? They retire, and then they have time to think about the trauma. So we saw a lot of Vietnam vets coming into treatment, you know, over the last few years. Why? Because they were retiring from their business. They were very successful for business. They were retiring. Now they got this time on their hands to think about this stuff. So every experience is a little bit different. And you look at where they are and what they did, you know, you can't tell, but these are, you know, female vets. They look like, you know, it's kind of hard to tell they're female, but they're out on the streets, you know, on patrol with everybody else. Sorry, just had to get my airplane in. But what do? We're so mobile, right? You know, there's no time to recoup. There's no time to readjust everything. You're just done. Okay. Sandbox, it's collective, just to give you a little, that's where Djibouti is, I was talking about earlier. This is Somalia here. You know, this is collectively the stands, because there's so many places that we were and still are in some of those places. I took this picture on the ramp in Kandahar, Afghanistan, when I was there. But, you know, I put that quote because I was found doing some research, and I thought about that. You know, if that's true, why are we so hard, though, about bringing our warriors home from war? everywhere. You know, our tribes, our Native American tribes, are so much better at it. Why? Because what happened to you becomes part of the fabric of the tribe. It's all of our trauma. It's everybody's. That's why a lot with Native Americans and other groups you can see intergenerational trauma, because it becomes part of it. But they get to celebrate that. They get to talk about that. You know, a lot of times with vets, we want you to shut up, come home, get a job, move on. We don't want to hear about what you did. And we think that you think that. Why? Because you don't know what to say to us. The worst thing you can ever say to a veteran is what?
Thank you.
Nothing. Your silence makes it worse because you don't know what to say. And if you say thank you, some people will take that. It took me 10 years to take thank you into your welcome. When everybody would say thank you for your service, Scott, I'd do this. I look at the floor, it's like, I didn't do anything. It took me 10 years to look up, square myself, and say you're welcome. Because I did serve my country proudly, and I did a good job. So, I mean, but it took me a long time to get there because I felt like people don't get the fact of who I was and who I am. So, I have maps when I do treatment and working with vets, so you can point out where you were. You know, if you say you were Balad, you say you were, you know, in Fallujah, you say you were down in Kuwait. You know, it just gives you a better idea. Same thing with Afghanistan. I was down here in Kandahar. I was up here in Khost, which is... Khost was an interesting place. It's a special ops base right across the border from Pakistan. Real fun place. Not really, I'm kidding. But, you know, when you do this, how do you translate this to coming home to Montana? You know, think about keeping yourself safe. What do you think the pucker factor is for those folks right now? Look up. Look up. Somebody could have the higher ground. Do you think that little rock avalanche was an accident? Or do you think somebody did it on purpose to set up an ambush? I mean, there's lots of those things. And then it just doesn't get turned off when you come home. You know, the worst thing you can really say beyond, you know, the silence is, but you're not in Iraq anymore. No kidding. Thank you. I'm healed. I'm great. Because you finally told me that. IEDs. You know, we talk about IEDs a lot. Improvised explosive device. VBEDs. Vehicle-borne IEDs. But what do you see? Tell me what you see. When you see this picture, what do you see?
Choke point.
What?
Choke point.
Choke point. Okay, non-veterans, what do you see?
Destruction.
Destruction. What else? Explosion. What else?
Anger.
Anger. Who's angry? Oh, okay. Okay, we're all angry. Sorry, it's not a therapy session. You didn't have to answer that. It was rhetorical. But what do you smell? What do you feel? Again, it's more than an explosion, it's more than fire, it's more than heat, it's more than destruction, olfactory. We have people that their triggers for their PTSD is the smell of diesel fuel. And guess what their job is? Diesel mechanic. Yeah. See, that works well, right? So, why are they having a panic attack every time they get in, they're working on a vehicle, and then all of a sudden, they get a big whiff. And then they're walking out and taking another smoke break, and the employer wants to know what the hell's wrong with you. So, you can go to the employer and educate them. And also, tell the guys when they're on the break, stop harassing them and say they killed more people on Call of Duty than he did in Iraq. Because people say that all the time. You think it's, you know, it's like, oh, it's funny. No, it's not funny. Call of Duty is not war. But then again, a lot of veterans that I know re-trigger themselves by playing it all the time. So, drone warfare is very different. One of the highest things we're seeing right now is PTSD with drone pilots. And you're like, drone pilots, they're flying those things from Nevada. How do they have PTSD from flying a drone in Nevada over Afghanistan? Why do you think that is?
Guilt.
Guilt.
They realize that what they actually did actually killed a lot of people.
And what else? What's that thing in the very front of the...
Camera, they can see it real time.
You see it real time and real details. You can see actually limbs being blown off in slow motion. If it's on heat, you can see, I mean, it's incredible what you can see and you don't want to see it. But this is the kind of stuff, and then what do? They go home to their families. There is zero processing. Their motto at that squadron is, we are always deployed. because they are. They're flying drones over Yemen. They're flying drones over Somalia. They're flying drones over Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iraq. So you know, again, it's very unique. And these guys were flown out of Kandahar. I took that, I think, when 05 Reaper drones. This is the only way the Air Force lets the Army fly airplanes. But what is that?
Raven.
Raven. Right. What's a Raven? Tell me about the Raven.
It's a
Squad level drone.
Yeah. You're putting in a backpack, floating from a laptop. I mean, it's great. Why? Because they can see beyond where they are, and they can, you know, map out what they need to do. They can map out who's there. They can spot them for somebody else. I mean, there's lots of really great stuff as far as it's happening with technology. But you still end up killing people. And when your job is to kill people, you do have guilt. You do have a lot of things. But you know you did your job. You know, one of my clients in particular killed a 12-year-old boy with an RPG in Iraq. He knew he did the right thing. But he has a 12-year-old at home. And that's his process every day. How do I deal with that? He, again, told me every time, I did the right thing, Scott. I know you did the right thing. So, we do a lot of things in war, and PTSD, the symptoms of PTSD are very helpful in wartime because they can keep us alive. Hyperarousal. You need to be hyper-aroused to see what's going on around you. You need things like one shot, one kill. The only thing I feel is trigger pull. Wow. It's not that it's cool, or recoil. It's not that it's cool, it's how we survive in a situation that we have to do what we have to do. But when we come home and somebody says, hey, how was it? You know, I remember talking to a jump master, and it was at Pope Air Force Base. And I said, so how'd it go? He said, hey man, no dirt spikes, good day. What's a dirt spike?
Film with one shoot.
Roman candle.
Yeah, parachute doesn't open, down they go, they die. If your training has the ability to kill you, you know, think about that every day. That this is what we have to deal with. Oh, I got a medal for you. And I went, oh. And all of a sudden she realized she did something wrong. She said, oh, hold on first. I need to take a break. Scott, can I see you in chambers? So I go back in chambers. I said, no, it's a challenge coin. A medal, an award is different. This, remember what I said, this is our bond to you and your bond to us. We will help each other get through this. And because we gave our coin when they came into the court. Some others gave at graduation. There's no data whether, you know, any's good or bad, but that's how we did it. So, but having patches, you can give patches. I mean, you know, we had one who designed the Seattle Veterans Treatment Court when I was out there. We had a veteran that worked in a design program at the local art school design it. I mean, it's really cool. It's got the Space Needle in it. It's got the mountains behind it. I mean, really neat. He did it for free, and he was so proud. Why? He was serving his fellow veterans. So, I mean, there's lots of things you can get from people, you know, other veterans that will, you know, they will serve as well. Mentors. We didn't talk a lot about mentors, but, you know, I know you got the shirt. Hopefully you went to the training, too. Because I saw one on eBay. No, just kidding. But mentors. You know, there's only been one research study done on veteran treatment courts so far, and it came up with two things. The most important things for successful veterans in this particular veteran treatment court where they did the research in Ohio was mentors and trauma-specific treatment. If you have trauma, if you have PTSD, you need to get evidence-based practice to make you better. Having a mentor, having a battle buddy that you can complain to, and they're not a narc, and they're going to help you through the system, that's one of the things that help the most. Because nobody gets it better than a vet on that level. Because everything goes, you know, everything's shortened. The conversations are always shortened. Was anybody at Balad when they were in Iraq? All right. Where else?
Well, we took Balad.
Nice. Looks a little different now with the pools, but they gave it back to the Iraqis. So anyway.
Give the whole country back.
Yeah.
So, Fallujah, all these places, El Assad, Takadum, all these places in Iraq or Afghanistan or other places you've been, it's a shorter conversation. You know, you do get that when you're working with vets and having mentors. If you don't know, educate yourself. It's nothing I can say, you know. You don't have to be the expert, but Google can help you a long ways, as well as all your family members, and asking them questions. You know, ask them, what's the most stupid thing somebody's ever asked you? Or what would you want them to ask you? Or what would you want them to know? And you know what it does? It helps you with that familiar relationship as well. So it goes far beyond the Veterans Treatment Court. One of my friends who I worked with, her father was a Vietnam vet. He never talked about it. And after the training, you know, she comes up and she says, "Oh, I've got a question for you." I'm like, "Uh-oh, what'd I say?" She said, no, my dad was in Vietnam." I said, "Well, you never told me that." She said, "Well, he doesn't talk about it much. But I'm going to go home and talk to him. What should I say?" Just ask him if he'd like to talk about his experience in Vietnam, because she'd like to know. So she went home, came back a couple weeks later, and she pulled me into her office and she started crying. And I'm like, "What's wrong? Is everything all right?" She said, "No." She said, "I talked to my dad. I have 4 siblings." And he said, "No one's ever asked me." He said, "I wrote a journal in Vietnam in 1968. Would you like to read it?" He said, "Remember, I was 18 years old, so it might not be something you want to hear about from your father, but if you'd like to read it, go ahead." And she said, "My relationship with my father changed at that moment." And he said, "Now I have these things that I can talk to him about, and now I talk to him about veterans and other ways that we can help them." So I mean, that kind of stuff goes beyond the courts. It goes beyond everything. It just gets you to a point that you can have a conversation, and now you know what to say after hello. Because after hello, there's a lot more that goes into it. So, other things you can consider, generational differences. We're not terrorists. I put that in there because somebody asked me one time, "How does it feel being a terrorist?" I'm like, "Excuse me? You served in the military, aren't you a terrorist?" I gotta go. But people unfortunately still have misconceptions about who we are and what we are, and those kind of things you kind of probably better off just turning around and walking. So, I guess adding that we don't trust easily. I mean, it just kind of goes with that, You have to gain our trust. We don't automatically give it. And I've worked with populations over 25 years in mental health, and veterans are the most, my grandmother would say, persnickety. We're a little bit more ornery than most, both men and women that I've treated in mental health, because we will challenge you every step of the way. We'll challenge what you do as a therapist. We want to know the whys. We want to know it, and we want to get in and out of your office quickly. So if you think I'm going to be in treatment for a year, you're wrong, especially our newer vets. Vietnam vets, they'll hang out a little bit longer. But I was at Dover Air Force Base a big chunk of my career, and every day was Memorial Day at Dover. We brought them home. I don't know if anybody's been on a flight line before. Anybody been on an airport flight line or anywhere like that? It's noisy, right? There's power carts gone, jet engines, all those kind of things. At Dover, everything closes. It's the most silence that I've had in my life when we open those doors and we bring someone home. And it's brought home honorably. And, for years, none of that was ever shown. And obviously, I think it's the family's decision whether any of that is shown. But there's a certain respect that we have for our honored dead in the military. If you don't know what a Gold Star parent or brother or mother is, you'll see people wear them on their collars. Those who lost their family members. I was in Orlando with my wife on vacation. We took our kids to Disney World, and we were in a Publix grocery store parking lot getting groceries, and I see this truck had a Gold Star on the back. And I started tearing up, and I told my wife, she said, "What's wrong?" I said, "Well, there's a Gold Star over there, and I need to go talk to that lady." I said, "But you know her?" "No. But I need to." So this is the kind of stuff that's built into our culture that's really hard to understand. It's like if you're in law enforcement and you see a fellow law enforcement officer get killed, and you hear that story, it could have been you. Bear by the grace of God go I, but it could have been you. So, honoring the people that have served is a mission that we have, and yet have to understand what you're honoring. But it's also up to the veteran to understand. It takes us a long time sometimes to understand that we are honorable. and we did honorable things even though we have done things that, most people haven't done. So, those are the things that you have to pay attention to. But, I hate to end on that note, but I know the reality is that's the reality we have. We know that we'll be honored in death. Military teaches us that. Anybody that's ever been to Arlington knows that you will be honored in death as a veteran, and seeing those kind of ceremonies. We are about ceremony. We are about formality. So when you do ceremony in your court, that is honoring us in a way that you probably don't think about. But we know about that. The coin presentation, the flags, all that matter to us. So I didn't learn a lot in Iraq, but I did learn that 3 men in a boat means stop. So, that's about all I learned. I mean, I came home saying shukran all the time, which is Arabic for thank you, and I did that a lot. And my wife's like, stop it. You know how to say thank you? Yeah, I do, but I'm learning. So, I don't know how much time we have left. Are we done? I don't even know. It's one of those things that, what time does it go to? I'm sorry. Anybody know?
Quarter after, I think.
Huh?
Quarter after?
Nice. So we got like 5 minutes for questions. Anybody got anything they want to share? Any questions? Yeah.
On the national training that you guys do in the summertime, is there a link or anything we can go to sign up to get out there to do that, or?
That'll be coming out in a couple months. The training is, our conference is in the National Harbor in DC, July 9th through the 12th. July 9th through the 12th. And you're talking about the boot camp for mentors?
Yes.
Yeah. So they're basically, you fill out the application and then you check boot camp. There's no special application, you just check boot camp. Now, if you get in early, we do have scholarships. So if you can, as soon as that thing pops out, National NADCP has a list. So they send out blasts, and they will send out a blast as soon as registration opens.
Okay.
But I think the call for papers is just ending, so that probably won't come out for another month or so.
Okay.
Yeah. Anybody else? No? Stunned silence?
Well, if I could put you on the spot, Scott.
Sure.
If y'all don't know, a listserv email came out from NADCP about an hour ago. And Scott's been named the new Director of Justice for Vets. So,
yeah, now the fun starts. Thank you. Yeah, I got like 57 emails and I didn't know what was going on. So, like, something happened. I don't know what it is, but something happened. Thank you. It's a mission for me. Best thing that ever happened to me is I got out of the military and I found a mission. What my mission is to help my fellow veterans. I don't care where I work, I don't care what I do, as long as I can help my fellow veterans, I'm a happy guy. So, the fact that you're doing what you're doing is a powerful thing, and every community is unique. So, I lived out in Seattle for like 8 years, and but I grew up on the East Coast. So I finally realized the entire world is East Coast centric. They don't know anything about some of the stuff that's going past the mountains. So, living in Forsyth for a while and, living out there and spending a lot of time fly fishing in Missoula, anyway, have my hobbies too. But, knowing that you guys are doing what you're doing, but also knowing we're here. So, we're only an email away. That's an old one. But anyway, you can find me on the Justice for Vets website, and we'll help any way we can. We want you all to succeed in the best way you can. We always need to be trained. We always need to learn new things, and we always need to brush off on what we think we're doing and say, look, where did we fall off track? It's happened every time in my life. Something, was something that I've been doing forever, and next thing you know, it's like, hey, how did I gain 20 pounds? How did that happen? Could be traveling, could be Pepsi, I don't know. But there's lots of things that we can get better at, and all we want to do is help you get there. So as you go forward, if there's questions you have, these trainings are online. I also do them at the conference. So tomorrow morning, I'm going to Sentence and Sanctions for Veteran Treatment Court. If you went to Carson's earlier, it's about the same, but there'll be a couple specifics more to Veteran Treatment Court, and then I'm doing another one on what am I doing? What did he ask me to do? Oh yeah, it's assessment to recovery. So this is a whole new thing of basically talking about from the time you do a screen till they're in recovery and out of court. And that's one thing, it was really a challenge for me to look at all the things that you have to tick off boxes-wise for clinical assessments, legal assessments, all the stuff you have to do. So I'll be here tomorrow morning. Thank you. Anybody, questions? We're good? Okay.